Now, Raven Star's Witching Hour with your host, Solaris BlueRaven.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Raven Star's Witching Hour. I am your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. I hope everybody's doing okay out there and in the illusion of space and time. We are 100% listener support, so if you like what you're hearing, go over to the Patreon account and just click the donate button. And we certainly appreciate your support for any contributions you can make to this excellent show here and also at this wonderful station here on revolution.radio. And what can I say? The world is strange, but I have a fantastic guest for you all this evening. My special guest this evening is Jimi Brent. And Jimi grew up in the Midwest with a passion for music and sports. After graduating from high school, he received a jazz music scholarship to the University of Miami. Miami, that's good, isn't it? He spent the first 11 years of his adult life as a professional singer and musician. As events unfolded, Jimi realized that he needed to expand his skills into an area that would give him a better financial living. He began to study accounting with frequent trips to the library and on-the-job training by a CPA mentor. And one day at work in the 1990s, while listening to an interview with George Green on a local AM talk radio station, Jimi became aware of the Phoenix Journals and the Contact newspaper author lecturer George Green, who founded the newspaper and publishing company in 1987 after the harmonic convergence. Through these books, newspapers, and his daily meditations, Jimi began to remember his identity as a Pleiadian starseed. And in 1992, he moved to California to become a businessman manager of the whistleblower Contact newspaper, later to become the Spectrum newspaper. During that time, Jimi and the newspaper staff interacted with and promoted people such as David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, Bo Gritz, Eustace Mullins, Little Crow, Ted Gunderson, Dr. Len Horowitz, Malachi Martin, Bill Cooper, Fritz Springmeier, Gunther Russbacher, Mark Phillips, and Kathy O'Brien, among many others, including intelligence agency operatives, leaking information that they deemed necessary for we the people to know. The newspaper wrote about everything from hidden Tesla technologies to secret underground bases, phony religions, corporate politicians, black projects, occulted history, UFOs, alien agendas, hidden archaeology, and spiritual concepts. Unfortunately, the newspaper organization was infiltrated by operatives and became useless in 1997. That led to a move to Las Vegas that same year. And since then, Jimi has continued working as a corporate CFO and writing and performing music in Las Vegas venues. He is multi-talented, an awesome host, and a fantastic being. And please welcome Jimi Brent to the show this evening. Good evening, Jimi.
Wow, Solaris, thank you so much. That was quite an intro.
It is, but you've got
that,
quite the bio. My pleasure. Welcome.
It's great to be with you again. I think it's been, about a year since the last time we talked together, and it's been way too long, I think. But I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Me too.
This evening, tonight,
I know,
depending on where you are.
Time. Yeah, exactly. Well, right now we're on a terraform rock called Earth. I guess they call it Earth. I don't know. So how are you doing? What's going on in your orbit?
I'm just, I don't know. I'm fluctuating from being angry to sad, back and forth. When I see what's going on in the world today and how easy it was for the world controllers to basically just lock everybody down, mask everybody up. I mean, all the things that are going on now, which you and I know are so obviously, pre-planned, premeditated, and have, other agendas other than what, is told to people in mainstream media. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. We knew this kind of thing was coming, but I don't think a lot of us realized how fast they were going to try and roll it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was expedited after Trump or during Trump's presidency. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I feel like we caused it in a way because too many people were waking up, and they definitely want to put the brakes on that. And Trump had a lot to do with it, and I don't agree with Trump on, some things, but overall, I have to say that he was great for freedom and for our country in so many ways. And, his promotion of vaccines and all that is very disturbing to me.
Agreed. Yeah.
But he, from everything he said and did, other than that, he had our freedom in mind, I believe. And he was surrounded, of course, by traitors and people who were constantly stabbing him in the back. And I don't think he realized how bad it was going to be when he got in there, and how many, people that were in his orbit there directly in his office were actually working against him. So it was very tough, and it's amazing he was able to accomplish anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I totally agree. Do you remember when he went through that one interview and he said he had pissed off a lot of people in the pharmaceutical industry?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, doesn't it surprise? I'm not surprised that this kind of a psyop, including this type of a psi virus, I call it the psi virus, transpired, because it seems to me like that was their vendetta against him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this was something that they had, wanted to do for a long time. And obviously, in order to control world populations, you have to scare the crap out of them. And typically, the way that's always been done was with war or the threat of war. So there was the so-called Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. But other than that, it's mainly been war that they've used to manipulate the masses. And, we've had the bird flu and MERS and SARS and a few things like that have popped up over the last 20 years, but they were never hyped to the point where, it would just scare the crap out of everybody through the constant hammering of the mainstream media worldwide, which is what they did in 2020. Obviously, it's a scamdemic. It's, if you look at the overall deaths in the United States for the entire year, it's directly in line with the previous years. There's no spike in overall deaths at all. They just rebranded the flu and bacterial pneumonia and a whole bunch of other things, COVID. And of course, they financially incentivized the hospitals and the caregivers to give them bonus money if they, diagnosed COVID patients and COVID deaths. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty clever the way they did it. But unfortunately for the world and for most people, this is a first step towards completely taking us over in their New World Order type system. And of course, China is the model for that.
Great, I couldn't say that better. Yeah, totally. And I always see it as a universal war crime. I've said this before on my show. I mean, it's beyond a regular war crime here in this world. It's a big deal. And the fact that people haven't even called it out as such is shocking to me. Quite honestly, I know that you have, obviously, and beings like me, but the psychological abuse and all the things that have happened, and plus all the people that have literally died because they were literally put on ventilators to expedite their deaths. I mean, I've talked about that too, but this is inexcusable, and yet they're just glossing over it like it's not a big deal. And then everybody's being slept. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm sure you have, but the majority of people are just going back to sleep.
Yeah, and it's stunning to me, and I that's why I say I go back and forth from being angry to sad, because when I go out in public, if I go to the grocery store or something, and I see these people, and it used to be that you'd see them, they put on their mask and walk in the store, but now they're wearing it all the time, and half the people are driving with them while they're by themselves in the car, which is absolutely beyond absurd. Mm-hmm. But they're putting it on the minute they get out of the car if they don't already have it on, and they're walking through the parking lot with them. They're leaving it on the store. I mean, it's almost, and some people are using it as a fashion statement. It just blows my mind that they're so easily manipulated, and I've said it a zillion times on my show that human beings have two major flaws that are, that are unawakened, or they haven't reached their unity with divinity within themselves. And they have these two flaws. Either they can be bought, like a lot of the politicians and the corporate people in the world, bankers and things like that. They can be bought with money, or they can be easily programmed. And we are fully aware, I know you are, of how easily people can be programmed. And unless you're aware of sources and methods, which most people are not at all, it's pretty easy for them to just pretty much, remote control society. And that's what they're doing right now. And that's why I say I go back and forth. It makes me angry when I see it, but then I feel compassion, and I feel sad for all these people that are just being bamboozled, and they don't get it, and they don't want to get it. And you can't reason with people that have made up their mind that they're doing the right thing.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's at this point where we just have to kind of break orbit with them, in my opinion. And I've mentioned this before about breakaway societies, star people, star beings, star seeds, hybrids, whatever you want to call us. The idea behind that would be just breaking away and going to another frontier. And I think that's the future. I really do. How it formulates, I'm not certain, but I do think that we can't live in that false matrix. And the whole idea behind them being socially engineered, I mean, that's just not acceptable. And yet, you're right. They're like little sheeple. They just go, just follow orders. That's all they know how to do. And if you try to communicate to them or enlighten them, they just get really freaked out. And so I'm done. I'm done trying to awaken people on that level. That's it for me on that one.
Yeah, me too. And I've tried many times to just do a basic thing. Like for instance, you go into a restaurant and you're wearing your mask, right, and sit down at the table and you take your mask off, because the Rona is so smart. It knows that as soon as you sit down, oh, they're out of bounds, hands off. I can't attack these people because they're sitting down now. So that's how smart the Rona is out there, folks. In case you didn't know that, you've heard of AI. Well, the Rona has its own kind of special AI and knows if you sit down and take your mask off that you're out of bounds and it's not going to attack you. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the absurdity of it. And when you point that out to people, say, okay, all right, you're wearing a mask, and you're 10 feet away. And now you're going to sit down at a table and take your mask off, but it's perfectly fine now that you're sitting down. Don't you see something strange about that sort of concept?
Yeah, exactly. They're not thinking. That's the bottom line.
They're not.
And the more they wear the mask, the less they can breathe. That's all hypoxia and toxicity on that level.
Yeah, and I'm really concerned about people because there's a lot of information coming out now that within a few months, depending on everybody's DNA and their age and comorbidities and things like that within a few months, a lot of people will be experiencing neurological damage from these vaccines. And I hope that is not true. But if it is, let's just say 6 months from now, all these people are having these problems. They're not going to be allowed to put that, even though if they suspect it themselves that it has something to do with the quaxine, they're going to say that this is the new wave of the next Rona, right? And they're going to blame it on some variant that is now attacking society. And that is just, you can see what their plan is and what they're going to do with that.
Yeah, they telegraph everything they do. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And that also leads to almost like a zombie apocalypse, when it comes down to it. The neurological damage is a big deal. And I think you're right. I think you're spot on in your assessment on that, for sure. And I've heard for the grapevine from different people that there has been stuff like that going on where people have had memory loss from taking the injection and some weird side effects connected to amnesia. So, I don't know how popular that is in a sense of how many people have had that reaction, but I do know from specific people that I've had communication with that has been going on. So,
yeah, that just upsets me a lot. I hate to see anybody be harmed by these things, and we know that is just a step towards the whole other thing. The next step is the vaccine passport, of course. And another thing that people don't get is that they're telling you, okay, you've been fully vaccinated, right? You've had both your jabs, but now you still have to wear a mask. Because even though you're vaccinated, doesn't mean you're protected or that anybody else is protected. But you still have to have the vaccine, you still have to wear a mask. Doesn't that raise any questions with anybody? I mean,
exactly.
It just
That's true.
boggles the mind there, because common sense and rational thinking, critical thinking has just completely gone out of the realm of possibility for most people. And it just makes me sad to think that. But getting back to my point, the next step is the vaccine passport, which I'm really happy to see some pushback with some of the governors. They're saying, they're trying to pass laws in certain states that they're not going to do that, which we absolutely have to do if there's any way we can do it. We have to push back as hard as we can on this stuff and not allow these things to be pushed out forward. But that is, Naomi Wolf, who is a liberal person, has come out and said, look, this software that they're doing, the vaccine passport, is just one step in the direction of the social credit score that the Chinese have. And it's just an easy flip of the software switch to take it from the vaccine passport to your social credit score. So if you say nothing but good things about your manipulators, your controllers,
Yes.
and you get your shots and you do all the things that they tell you to do, well, by golly, you're going to be able to travel and get a good job and get good housing and do all this stuff that, and probably, some easy money somewhere. But if you don't, well, it's going to be a little rough on you. Your social credit score is going to go down, and it's just not going to be that convenient. I mean, this is where it's all heading, and
Yeah.
the Rona was a means to an end, and so I don't know. I wish you and I and many others see this very clearly, but the masses are just not seeing it, and they're not looking for it.
No.
They're comfortable in the reassurance of mainstream media constantly parroting the same information, and making them feel like, yeah, we're this is science. We're on the cutting edge here, and we're going to do our part, and flatten the curve for the next 20 years with our.
Oh, I'm not doing this game board. I'm telling you, I'm not playing this
Me
game.
neither. Me neither.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And but it is about, you're right, controlling the mass collective, but it's a self-destruct sequence. There's no way out of it. It's a wormhole to nowhere. And these people are so dumbed down, and I think they were dumbed down before all this started to such a degree. I mean, we talked about socially engineered beings and
Right.
people, but this is, these guys were prepped. I'm sorry. They were ready to go insofar as being able to be indoctrinated into this program. In my opinion, there was no resistance. It just went smooth as glass, So to me, it's just it was unbelievable how easy it was for these guys to snare everybody.
Absolutely. And this is war. And if people don't recognize that we are at war, and it's the war of the controllers against us, against the people who are awakened, against the people who seek freedom, all of the great things in the world, goodness, kindness, compassion, love, cooperation. I mean, all the things that we want for humanity. They are at war with us for that, because they don't want that at all. That's the worst thing. They want to cull the herd, which is the way they refer to us as the bewildered herd and many other names. And unfortunately, those terms are playing out. They want to completely control us, depopulate by a large amount. And all of these steps that they're taking are in that direction. As you and I and many, many others, I don't know how many of us there are in the world, but we came here, to call bullshit on this stuff, because we can see that we've been gifted with that. When we come into this world, we awaken and we see what's really going on, so we can hopefully share it with others, and that's what we're trying to do. And I always say, I don't know everything. I know a small portion of it, but I know what's right and what's wrong, and I know what manipulation is. And so I say to people, look, don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Get out there and look for yourself, but don't look in the obvious places. The mainstream media is not there for your benefit. They are a tool working in lockstep with, the so-called deep state, whatever you want to call them, the powers that shouldn't be. They're all working in concert here to make this happen. And we have been at war for a long time. If you think about humanity and what they've been doing to us, with the education system, you've got fluoride in the water, you've got chemtrails in the air with nanoaluminum, strontium, barium, all these other, particles that are destroying our immune systems and our ability to function in the world. You've got glyphosate, all that's absolutely throughout our entire food chain. Fluoride, I think I mentioned fluoride. We've got everything. We're being poisoned on all these different levels, which has contributed to the drop in IQ for a lot of people, and the drop of, to me, consciousness, IQ, whatever you want to call it, that's all synonymous. It's consciousness is intelligence. It's awareness. And if you're unconscious, if you're just going through life as programmed and, just kind of taking everything on face value, then you're going to be subject completely to this. And you're right, what you said. It was so incredibly easy. And I think that they determined that we were ripe for this kind of thing now, that they had achieved their goal of dumbing down society, and not just in the United States, but everywhere. And they just did it, and it's worked fabulously for them.
Right. I still think there's going to be a universal wave coming their way, something beyond everything to kind of neutralize this at some point. But to what degree everybody is along for the ride and suffers is another scenario. But I do see an end game that they do lose in the end. That's even a happy note for anybody. But right now, as we watch this world, and I mean, to me, it's just like, this is insanity in motion, and I can't participate with the insanity. I just can't be part of it. And I've noticed more and more. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you notice it too, but you're out there in Vegas, but people are just, they're not right, man. They're just all acting really strange, regardless of the mask or not. I mean, their behavior is just completely screwy. So that's something that I've noticed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed it too. And it seems like, the longer this goes on and the more irrational people become, because this is a form of psychological torture, having to wear a mask. I mean, I just, simple things like, if you just think about, all right, Muslims make their women cover their face. Okay. So that's a form of intimidation. It's a form of manipulation. And I'm sorry if you're a Muslim and you think that's a great thing, but it's a psychological game that's being played on people to get them to submit to authority. And that is the exact same game that's being played on humanity right now. Put a mask on. Don't let anybody see your bright smile. Don't let anybody see your emotion, your expression, which makes you a human being. When you smile at somebody, there's a tremendous amount of energy that's being exchanged there. And people don't understand how important that is. We are, connected. And when you cut that off, when you cut off that expression and that connection between, human beings, if you're walking through a store, or anywhere that you go where there's other people, it's a classroom or a work environment, you're cutting off that expression between people. And, that's a psychological form of torture. And so I know a lot of people are just feeling the effects of that. And I'm sure that the psychotropic drug use must be going through the roof at this point.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you're right. Yeah. Also, you're using your voice, tonal, singing. I mean, you're a singer, the idea behind using your voice for projection, empowerment, that's being shut down. That's so right. All of these things are happening to control, manipulate. Yeah. And the psychological abuse right on as far as what they're doing. And I mentioned this before, and as well as I do, because you've done a lot of investigation with MK Ultra, isolating a target, keeping them away from family, friends, anyone who can support them on any level, keeping them in one little stasis of control. Well, that's what's happened to everybody when this was initiated onto the timeline. So I started looking at, man, after I've been with covert warfare, I looked at everything like, holy cow, I couldn't believe it was happening, because I saw every method of attack. I saw every step that they were doing to indoctrinate each person into this type of a project, which was really, really weird. One thing I was going to mention to you, I've been hearing through the grapevine, so to speak, that these injections are also causing blood clots. Now, have you heard that as well?
Yes, I have. And I'm trying to remember the type that I think I can't remember if it's a Pfizer one. There's one particular one in Europe. They've actually put a stop to it temporarily, of course, while they look into it, because so many people develop these blood clots, particularly in the lungs. Now, when if you think about this, when this first came out, a lot of us were looking at other things as well. Now, they could very well have, put out a bioweapon of some type of pathogen in China, in New York City, selected places. But I think that it's just as possible that they've, done a lot of this with frequency.
Agreed.
And a lot of, 5G is their new, super fast technology. Well, you can download a movie faster. Well, with 5G, it's a wide range, though. It goes from like 5 gigahertz to like 100 gigahertz. But the 60 gigahertz frequency, from what I understand, is what causes the red blood cells in the body to not be able to absorb oxygen. it interferes with the red blood cells' ability to absorb oxygen. So what does that mean? If you can't absorb oxygen, you want to see people falling down in the street, keeling over, that would do it.
Right.
So
like the footage in China.
Exactly. And so when we think back and we go, they showed us all these video images of people just keeling over dead in the street. Well, that can easily be done with 5G technology. And I believe a lot of these towers are tunable.
Mm-hmm.
So they can, if they want to bring about another wave, they can just go, okay, we're going to crank the 60 gigahertz for a day or two. And it's just going to really wreak havoc, more so on the elderly and people with other health issues. And then they'll bring it back after they've done the damage. And they're not going to know, for the most part, what caused this. They're not going to be able to look at some kind of scientific equipment to measure the frequencies and see what they're being bombarded with, because we're constantly in a soup of electromagnetic frequencies.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
That's another angle that they can use on this, and I think they very well did, because I know in Wuhan there was two elements. One, they had forced vaccinations a month or two before this so-called outbreak, and then they also rolled out 5G, and they did the same exact thing in northern Italy. And these were hotspots for the so-called beginning of the Rona. And so that definitely is something that needs to be looked into. There's a variety of ways that they can affect us like that, and then just call it whatever they want, and we don't have the means, the equipment, and to do the research on what exactly did cause this, new thing. And now with the added element of all these people getting their Rona vaccines, now there's 3 different ways they can get you. So
yeah,
it's just really, really insidious. And it's, if you view life in this realm as a spiritual school, it's like, okay, everybody's been kind of cruising along. Most of, the dark side has been largely covert, unless you're, one of us and been, looking at this stuff for many, many years. For the general public, it's been hidden, the child trafficking, all these nasty things that they're doing, the pay for play for the politicians, and all this stuff's been going on forever. But it was mostly hidden. But now they decided to, bring it forward, crank it up, and put it in our face. So what does that mean? It means that we're being tested in a spiritual sense. Okay. This is being put in your face, the information about all the bad stuff that's going on, about the satanic ritual abuse, all of these things that are coming forward, and much more so than they ever have. So humanity has a choice: can awaken, see it for what it is, and put a stop to it, take a stand. And we have choices on how we can take a stand. Don't spend money on corporations that are promoting this kind of thing. Don't cooperate with orders that go against your freedom. I mean, we do have choice to do things like that. And if we ever unite as a human family and stop cooperating, that is the ultimate power that we have, non-cooperation. And that's, I see that as a huge spiritual test for humanity in general. That we are all encountering right now. So we have that choice. What are we going to do with it?
Right. Well, I think that's a good point you make. And also, you see all the people that have been socially engineered. They're very, I don't want to say they're weak, but I guess they are to some degree. I mean, they're very afraid to step out of the box. And those of us who have been through various programs, whether we've been through, experimental programs or we've been through investigations, it's the bottom line is we have this ability to go beyond, because we are just calibrated to the universe and a different field of energy. It doesn't, there's no fear there. There's just a fearlessness kind of thing, which is, I like that energetic for me. I mean, that's the way I like to roll. But I see that's the problem we're running into is not syncing everybody up, because there's too much fear with a lot of these people. And that's why I say the breakaways is probably what we're dealing with at some point. But yeah, this is a dead end to nowhere. And if these people don't see that, they don't have a future. This is not the wave of the future. It can't be the wave of the future. And you're right about all these directed energy weapons insofar as they weaponize pneumonia and how it's attacking the body. And I was calling that out too when it first started, when this whole scenario started, because of the blood clots and all this. It just reeked of inflammation of the body and the organs and everything connected in with a directed energy weapon. Because I've had microwave toxicity or radiation toxicity in the past, so I know. And that was from some of the technology I was interfaced with. So, this stuff is hardcore, but these people have no clue what's coming. I mean, this is just a precursor to the bigger scenery.
Yeah, like I said before, you and I, we know sources and methods, and we don't know all of them because there's probably a bunch that we haven't even heard of yet that are even more bizarre. But we know a lot of them, and we know the psychological aspects of what they've done to us and what they've put out there. And just I wish we had such a huge platform that we could begin, to throw that out there in the mainstream. Wouldn't it be awesome? And I've thought about this so many times. I even had a few dreams about all of a sudden breaking in during the nightly news. I think there's been a few movies like that where you break in and just start telling people the truth. Look, what these people are telling you is a huge lie. This is what's really going on. And then just,
right.
I think that movie Broadcast, I think they did some of that.
Yeah, there was another one too.
Yeah,
several of them. But yeah, no, you have a great point. Well, they're controlling the narrative.
Awesome, though, if we could do that, just break in for, like 1 or 2 minutes every night where they couldn't stop it. And
well, you know what? You put it to the ethers, and anything can happen at this point in the universe. So. Yeah. And I can't believe people believe the snake oil. That's what amazes me. I mean, these people are lying through their teeth for a paycheck, and the people are just listening to them. They're trusting what? Illiterate science, mainstream science? Are you kidding me? The lies, the deception, it makes no sense.
Oh, yeah. And then they contradict themselves constantly, and it seems to be okay.
Fauci. I mean, he should be, like I said before, these guys are like war criminals. I'm sorry, but it's Nuremberg 101. It's a no-brainer, really.
And I want to make a point. I know a lot of your listeners are pretty savvy, so I'm sure that they've heard this, but I want to throw this out there anyway. Dr. Kary Mullis, who invented the PCR tests, okay, this is something, he got a Nobel Prize for it back in the 90s, I believe. And he came out and said, look, the PCR test is not meant to diagnose any kind of disease, period. It's just a method of amplifying material with, that's in the body to be viewed. That's it. There is no way this should be used or could be used to diagnose diseases or pathogens. He said that 20 some years ago. And he also called Fauci a fraud 20 years ago when Fauci was using these same tests for AIDS. And they diagnosed lots of people that did not have AIDS with AIDS and systematically, ended up taking them out with a lot of these drugs that they developed. So Fauci is, he's like a little Nazi. I mean, this guy, needs to be locked up somewhere.
I agree.
And, Kary Mullis said this guy is a fraud. Fauci is a fraud. There's video of him. You can find it on the internet. It won't be on YouTube probably because they pretty much locked that down. But you can find it if you look around for it. And so with that in mind, it's the same thing now. And another thing that Dr. Kary Mullis said, if you keep amplifying the material, the genetic material that you get in a sample from somebody, you can make it look like anything. And that's what they've done with these tests. They say, oh my God, we've got hundreds of thousands of positive tests. Well, you can make anybody go positive if you keep amplifying, the tests, which is what they've done. And they've used these bogus tests, and they've never isolated the so-called Rona 19 either. There's all kinds. I mean, that's a whole other thing that we can get into as far as germ theory goes and all that. But even if you use their sort of narrative about it, the PCR tests do not test for any specific virus, period. So if people understand that the tests do not mean you have any kind of Rona virus, and that you're positive and you're going to either contract it or give it to somebody else. Once they understand these tests are bogus and they're used to create fear and thus manipulate the masses, the game is over if we were ever able to get that information out there to the general public. But the sad thing is, as we said before, these people are glued to their TV sets on mainstream media, and they're not going to look beyond. They're not going to look at the things that we look at. They're not going to see that for the most part. So my fantasy of breaking into mainstream news is something that I think could be helpful. People would at first they would go, "Oh, wow, this is crazy! Look at these crackpots." They're probably call them white supremacists or something. So trying to tell us this is all a hoax. This is all a manipulation. Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory. But then, over time, they're going to start questioning it. So that.
Well, you never know. Stranger things have happened. At this point, it's kind of like you never know what's going to go down on the timeline. I said It's like a balloon. The world's like a balloon that's popped. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, and then there's the aspect of Trump coming out with his new media platform. Now, if you get 100 million, 80, 100 million Trump supporters on that platform, and then, all being able to, speak their minds without the, massive censoring and deplatforming, that could really throw a lot of good information out into the collective consciousness. So I see that could be very powerful too. So
wherever they can communicate the truth, and I think that's one of the reasons I like Revolution Radio too, because we're out here doing the best we can to at least enlighten people to some degree.
Yeah, so, I love that. And you've been at this for so long, and you're extremely knowledgeable, and you've been telling people the truth for so long, and all of these. Every time we do it, though, I think we're putting a ripple out there into the collective consciousness, and in some way we're improving those vibrations. So I'm compelled to do it as much as I can, and I know you are too. To share as much, again, not to say I know everything, because I definitely don't, but I do know certain things that I have studied for the last 30 years, and I'm willing to share it. And I hope that nobody takes what I say at face value, but they will go out and look for themselves. Just do your own investigation. That's what I urge people to do. It's a little harder than it was a few years ago because they've removed a lot of material. And I would say don't use Google as your main search engine. Use some other ones, and you'll find more information. But there is pushback. There are people coming out with documentaries they're quite good. Look for those and keep an open mind. The essential thing for growth and for expanding knowledge and consciousness is an open mind. And that means the willingness to consider other things that don't necessarily agree with your belief system. Doesn't mean you have to jump at every time somebody comes out with a new concept or idea. It doesn't mean you have to take it in and believe it, but consider it. Use your rational thinking skills, and hopefully that's a big deal. You still have that.
The common sense.
Yeah, use the common sense if you have it, and do your best to consider that maybe what you were taught or shown might not be the absolute truth. Or just at least consider it, and that opens the door, for greater understanding. I'm always willing to change my mind when if I get new and better information. And I think that the more people are able to have that sort of mindset, don't be locked into your mindset. Always be willing to grow and learn.
I agree.
My 2 cents there.
No, it's smart advice. And you're a wellspring of information as well. I mean, you're right. You have a lot of information under your belt for the past 30 years, plus or minus. And I was going to ask you, what is your strength in the sense of what is the what's the area of interest for you insofar as your research goes?
I'm just a very, very curious person. And when I encounter concepts and ideas, even as a kid, I didn't take things at face value, and that really disturbed my parents and my teachers because I would always question things that
That's right.
they didn't want me to question. And, whether it was religion or scientific things, or because my mind just went off in a different direction automatically. And I don't know if there's any one area. Obviously, the whole, behind the scenes manipulation of our world is a huge one. But I'm also extremely fascinated by history, because the more you look into history, the more you realize how what we've been taught is our history is completely, wrong. It's just not true. And I'll give you an example. Something that's really come to the forefront in the last few years is that the concept of what people call Tartaria. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. And
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
give people, some food for thought and something to look into, because there's a lot of great websites now that are looking into this. When I say Tartaria, people are, well, what the heck are you talking about? Tartaria, what the heck is that? Well, if you've never heard of it, there's an area in between China and Russia. I guess mainly you would refer to it today as Siberia. But back on maps, going back to 1200 and all the way up through probably the mid 1800s, there was the Tartarian Empire, or the Greater Tartaria. Tartaria was on the maps up until the mid 1800s. And it was this huge country. And then all of a sudden, it just completely disappeared off of all the maps, all the world maps. And so what a lot of people are sort of speculating about that is that there was, in their fairly recent past, a rather highly evolved, both technologically and otherwise, civilization that was worldwide, not just in that area, but all over the place. And the evidence is a lot of these buildings that they call Greco-Roman design or whatever, dating back to, 2,000 years, some of them, or at least that's what they say. And a lot of them have been repurposed. That's what people are saying, that's been repurposed and called cathedrals. Any kind of buildings, what you see, those structures that have the spires on them sticking up. And what a lot of people have said is that that's actually technology. That those things sticking up out of those buildings were actually collecting free energy. And that we had a world that was basically using free energy for a long, long time. And they built a lot of these structures, because these structures are everywhere. They're on every continent. They're in South America, obviously North America. We see them all over, all these Capitol buildings and everything. Although there's even cathedrals in the United States. Of course, they're all over Europe, everywhere. They're in Africa. They're literally everywhere in the world, and they're very similar. And this is something. There's some really good YouTube channels I want to throw out there. For you to look at is a guy named John Levi. It's spelled Jonlevi. Look up his YouTube channel. He's done so many really interesting videos looking at all these things. And something happened to that civilization. And a lot of people refer to it as a mud flood or liquefaction of Earth, which caused mud to flow sort of like a flood, which is very fascinating, because you've got these buildings that were supposedly a couple hundred years old that are still around now, but their ground floor is, a lot of them is partially obstructed. And in some cases, you've got the ground floor is at an angle to where some of the windows are covered, some of them are not. And instead of using the ground floor as the first floor, now it's become a basement, and they reposition where the steps are, the entrance steps, to a higher level. And this is seen all over the place. If you look in a lot of major cities in the United States, you'll see, like in New York, you'll see these buildings that have windows at the ground level. Nobody builds a building like that. There's no reason to put windows at ground level like that. Anyway, so And some people will say, "Oh, we're just going to try to let the sun into the basement." Well, you don't have to do that. You can use mirrors and all kinds of things to get light into a basement. And you wouldn't do it on half the building,
Right.
where half of it's exposed, half of it's not. There's so many things like that, just strange anomalies. And then the other thing is, we know there were giants. And the Smithsonian, they were, a lot of people were bringing them giant skeletons from all over the place. And the Smithsonian basically just buried them and never put them out for anybody to see. And so you've got a lot of ancient buildings that have these huge doors. Now, why would somebody do that? And how would they do it? There's a lot of these buildings that we would struggle to try and construct today. And then you've got a lot of these old statues that they say were chiseled out of, some kind of stone. And when you look at it, and when artists look at it and say, no, you could, there's one really famous one, I can't remember where it's at, but it shows a fishnet around this statue. And that's not something you can chisel into, marble or some other really hard stone. So there were technologies that went way beyond what we know about in the construction of a lot of these buildings. They were made way too big for people our size. And the fact that a lot of these giant skeletons, you can even, I haven't done it probably in about 6 months or a year, but I used to be able to just type into Google giant skeletons and see a whole bunch of them that archaeologists have dug up. So you can find them. There are pictures out there, and it's really mind-boggling. And in the Grand Canyon, for instance, there's a whole area there where they discovered a lot of these giant skeletons. And not only that, they discovered Egyptian artifacts and gold and all these things in the Grand Canyon. Now, how is that possible?
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, was there a civilization that was pretty much, very similar in their technology, in what they had, the way they constructed things worldwide, and was it basically attacked at some point? And there's a lot of evidence of that. And I'll throw something else out there. This is all food for thought. So, call me crazy, call everybody crazy that's looking into this, but I think there's something to it. If you look at, there are places in the world where you'll see what looks like windows and doors in the side of a mountain. And people will say, oh, well, the natives took their chisels and carved these things into the side of the mountain, the granite rock, and carved out these things. And what a lot of people are speculating is they're saying, no, there's some kind of beam weaponry was used to liquefy these structures, and they collapsed into what we refer to as a mountainous area. And some parts of the original building survived and looked like what we're seeing in the side of some of these so-called mountains.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely fascinating. And that's something that I've kind of gotten into in the last few years, and a lot of other people have too. But, of course, the whole Rona thing kind of trumped it all when they put it in our face, and really locked us down and all. That's a lot of the research that we're going off.
It's a distraction too.
It's a distraction into another direction that is fascinating, but how useful is it with, given what's going on right now? And then the whole concept of the movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Did they shrink our human beings at some point? Did some kind of technology come in and knock all this civilization down and destroy most of the structures? Some obviously are still there.
A miniaturized world.
And did they make us smaller and more easy to manage? These are just questions to throw out there and wonder. We don't know.
It's a good question. Yeah, that makes people think.
So if
anything's possible.
If these buildings were made for these much larger people, what happened to them?
Right.
And what happened to us? So
Yeah, that's a good question you make
people are
there.
probably out there going, "What the heck is he
No, not
talking
on this channel. No, not on Rev Radio. But yeah, and I think about the Giants, and I know Jason Gerald's done a lot of excellent research on the Giants, on different formulas of the Giants. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, you have to ask also, are they coming back? What's coming back? I think that we have architects that are coming back. I do. And I think that it's not going to be a piece of cake for those who have been misusing the types of technologies we have been kind of decoding. So I think that we're in for something. I don't know if we'll live to see that, but I do know that's going to happen at some point in the continuum. So that's my own 2 cents on that. But
I think so too. I just have that gut feeling that
yep,
that's the way it's going to end up. But I
it's
hope
going to
it's
end
sooner
the
than
right way.
later.
Yeah, we're going to make it end right. Even if I'm off planet, I'll send
Yeah.
some machines over.
And I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you, how do you see, we talked about sort of the separation of um, those of us who are, seeing the world in a different way and everybody else out there. How do you see that possibly happening frequency wise?
Well, the breakaways, if you want to talk about the ascension waves and different
Yeah.
fields of energy, yeah, I've always mentioned, and I've been talking about that we're in the wrong space-time configuration. I think that's part of the problem, which means the fields are not, they're not in alignment properly. In other words, it's too much weaponization on this particular world with the biodome the way it is. That's created a lot of distortion in the field. So I'm looking at it on that level. I'm also looking at on the level of consciousness and frequency. So those of us who are on a higher field of energy in our state of consciousness, which has remodulated our bioelectric suits, we're already breaking away. We're already going. So however that formulates, to me, it seems like we're just going to go into a split. I don't want to call it a new Earth star, but I think it's going to be a different formula and a different space-time configuration. And I think the other ones are going to go to what degree they've evolved and where their frequency is at. And I think that this correlates to some degree, this agenda. So, that's my 2 cents on that one. But I've been doing my own research too when it comes down to just this science beyond science, and looking between the worlds. And I find that frequency defines everything, as you know. And we are frequency beings. So if we're being contained in a field or there's something going on where they're trying to reconstruct our DNA, which is obvious with this injection, then that tells me that there's an attack on the DNA code and that needs to be addressed as a universal war crime, right? Because we are star beings. Any way you look at it, I don't care if people want to accept that or not, we are. So I look at it as a big deal. And I think we are going to break away. I do get that one way or another, we're going. So it doesn't mean we have to physically die. It just means that we are not going to be part of this facade anymore. We can't do this. This is not part of our galactic heritage.
Right. And you and I both know that, when you leave the physical body, it's just a shift in frequency. It's not the end, so we got that going for us.
That's right. You have one universe, you go from one universe to the next.
Right. And that's been confirmed by so many. And of course, we just intuitively know that. And so I look forward to something like that. And, but, I think a lot of us have this thing about we want to so much to help others.
Right.
We don't just want it for ourselves to, have this world that is wonderful and great. We'd like to see that for all of humanity. But then there's the thought, well, everyone must learn at their own pace, and they must seek their own level, which is true. We can't walk the journey for anybody else. We can do our best to help them along in any way that we can, and others have certainly helped us, in our journey. But at some point, hey, you just have to let it go, and it's just going to go the way it's going to go. Nobody looks forward to suffering and manipulation and all that the way it's going now. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes, right?
Right. But I think also I'm looking at I don't want any contracts with these people. Okay. So we don't have any real contracts with them. They've tried to create contracts with us. So I find that if we are connected to the cosmic design work in a sense of being connected to the off-world species, what I'm going to call off-world intelligence, I find that gives us a different calibration for being able to break away and just saying we're not doing this anymore. And this is why. This is part of our celestial heritage and we do not participate with these things. So we'll see how that rolls. I know it sounds kind of vague right now, but I think that's the formula down the timeline for the breakaway societies. I think it's going to be coming from a more galactic code, and they will have no choice but to allow it. And not with, because we have, national security now that's trying to control, manipulate everything like that. So that's going to go away, in my opinion. I think it's going to change. They want a new world. Well, let's give them a better one. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of talk lately about a massive disclosure happening sometime in June. I don't know if you heard anything about that, that the so-called,
Right.
government.
We're heading for a break. Hang on for a second. We're going to have to get back into this in just a second. Everybody, listen to Raven Stars Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My fantastic guest tonight is Jimi Brent. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to Raven Stars Witching Hour. I am your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My fantastic guest tonight is Jimi Brent. And Jimi, how do people reach out to you if they want to connect with you, watch your YouTube, or whatever else you have going on?
Trying to think the best way now. Things have changed a bit, but probably you can find me on insidethematrix.org. That's a website where I post not only my own shows, but other videos that I find are of import. I'm also on Rumble. So if you look up Inside the Matrix on Rumble, you're going to find me there as well. And that's probably a better place because there's so much spam happening, on the insidethematrix.org that a lot of times I just don't even pay attention to the messages that come in because there's all these people, just constantly spamming it over and over again. But yeah, so probably on Rumble, just send me a comment or a message there, and be happy to correspond or talk or whatever it is. And if somebody wants to share information, I'm always up for that as well.
Excellent.
And speaking with you again, it's so nice and really reminds me, and this is a great reminder that it really is helpful for a lot of us who feel like we're isolated out here in the world to be able to talk with kindred souls who understand us, because it's such a rare thing,
Agreed.
these days.
Yeah.
And we've become even more isolated than usual, with this whole lockdown BS. So yeah, it's just, I guess it's important. It's a reminder to me that to be around more like-minded people. And before we took the break there, I was thinking about this whole concept of, the government coming out with disclosure again. And there's a lot of rumors flying around that they're actually going to start talking. And they've kind of thrown out a few nuggets here and there saying, the Pentagon actually admitted that they had, so-called alien craft and little things like that, which have kind of trickled here and there. And I think they're just trying to test the reaction, of the masses out there. But one thing to keep in mind that, the Rona thing, if it doesn't go as well as it has so far, if it starts going south on them because too many people are, just standing up to it and calling BS on it, one of the next levels of fear mongering and fear inducement would be a fake alien invasion. So if you have this scenario where they're going to reveal to us that, oh yeah, there's all these aliens out there, yada yada yada, and then a few months later, all of a sudden, they've got 300 craft hovering above New York City during the day or something, saying, oh no, we're being invaded. We must unite into the New World Order government so we can fight these bad aliens. That is something that they've thrown out there. Project Bluebeam was another one where they would use holographic technology. That's been around for ages. We talked about that in the 80s, that they were, very seriously contemplating doing that. And they've tested that technology over the years. They used it in the first Iraqi sort of invasion, where they put a hologram up in the sky of what a lot of those soldiers would have considered to be Allah or Muhammad, and they just laid down their arms and walked out and surrendered. So that worked tremendously well, but that wouldn't work as well everywhere. But that the holographic technology that they have is just, unbelievable. Just
Mm-hmm.
it would be totally believable to people to see it. They can take images of people, and we've seen examples of this where they've done TV shows and put Michael Jackson in there performing in the middle of a whole, other group of people who are actually there live, but he's in a hologram that
Right.
taken.
Yeah, I've
You know
seen
what I'm
that.
saying? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's a it's a
real
good video.
as can be. And they've
Yeah.
also done experiments where people have, projected a hologram into a room, and people in the room actually think the person's there. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, poof, they disappear and they go, ha ha, it's just a hologram. So we know that technology exists. They can do it in the sky. They can do it a lot. It's just a projector. So they can put it in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different places. So I'm just throwing it out there for people to be aware that if they do start disclosing, that we're not alone in the universe, which obviously we know that we're not, um,
Mm-hmm.
that there could be another agenda to that, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. A good point you make. Well, they're trying to control the narrative again because we had been the disclosure. The truth media was the disclosure, not the alternative media, but the real truth media, and even beings like me who disclosed information. My new
Oh, yeah.
book, Alien Intelligence, covers everything, and that was disinformation in the UFO arena that I talked about as well. Which, of course, how timely that book was published, and I was out there doing a presentation right a month before all this stuff and the shutdown happens. But I
Oh,
agree
yeah.
that yeah. So they're trying to shut it down. I mean, in a sense, they're trying to control the narrative, and they're going to do whatever they want to do to control, manipulate, and even instill fear in the mass collective, if you ask me. But what's really funny, what I see, is that they should be careful because I know they think they're all that, a bag of chips and a Snickers bar, but I'm telling you, they're nothing compared to the off-world species. And they start
Oh,
flaunting this stuff, they're going to wind up finding that there's going to be something over their shoulder that's not their ally. And that's what I see coming. I say, you know what? Be careful how you mimic aircraft, and be careful how you mimic extraterrestrials because they're not amused. And that's my 2 cents. That's my 2 cents.
oh, I totally agree. And I just hope that happens. I
Oh,
mean,
I
that
will.
would just be,
You
wouldn't that
watch.
just, we would be just jumping up and down
Oh,
and
yeah.
celebrating to see.
I see it. I mean, I'm telling you. I'm telling you. And that's why I always look at these people like they're clowns. They're kind of like Keystone Cops. I mean, they can get away with their stuff because people are dumbed down. But those
Right.
of us who are really switched on, I mean, we think the way the cosmic design thinks, in a sense, our consciousness.
Hmm.
So, if we have answers and information, then they should really be careful how they're behaving here on this timeline.
Yeah, that's their bravado and their arrogance are what's going to get them because
Hmm.
they think they're all that, like you said, all that in a bag of chips and a Snickers bar. Uh, they think they've had their way with us for so long that they think that will never come to an end. And of course, I think that will be their undoing at some
I
point with
agree.
their
I think,
their
yeah,
arrogance.
they have an Achilles heel.
Yeah, they definitely do. And in the meantime, speaking of Achilles' heel, non-cooperation is just so powerful if we can get enough people to engage in that. It's totally peaceful,
Hmm.
but it's just powerful. We outnumber them so vastly. That we're talking a few thousand people in the world that just run this whole show.
Hmm.
It's not that many, and
Yeah.
in conjunction with some. Uh, how would you say, non-human types as well.
Hmm.
But it's not a huge group. And if we ever get to the point where we see through the game in a very large collective level, it's over. It's
Hmm.
just over.
I
So,
agree.
and that's what we're all, that's why we talk, right?
Hmm.
Solaris, isn't it that one of our main motivations is that we want people to see things on that level?
Right. And raising their consciousness too by information. That's the bottom line.
Hmm.
That will definitely help them out of that. But it's really interesting with this whole Psi virus that shut down and everything. It's kind of weakened people energetically too, and physically, psychologically. So they've got to reconstitute themselves. They've got to step back into their power. They've been disempowered, and that's going to take a little bit of work, but not too much. But yeah, no, I agree with you on that one. There is a way to peacefully, you know, disengage, so to speak.
I think another scenario that could happen is, people have talked about for ages about 10 days of darkness. Well, I see that as maybe the internet going down for a while. If
Mm-hmm.
that were to happen, it would really force people into a whole different mindset because everybody's glued to their, their phones and their laptops and their computers and smart this and smart that. But just imagine if that was just not available for a period of time, what that would do. People would have to begin talking to each other. What a concept, huh?
Good luck.
We can't, you can't text somebody if there's no text, capability. So you have to actually talk to a human being.
That's right. People have to establish that. Well, they have to learn how to communicate again. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's for darn sure. Yeah, well, television too. I don't think they're going to miss that. If they just shut their TVs off, that would be 100%, 90% of the war right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of the technologies, if it all went down, that would be an interesting scenario just to see how that would affect the collective consciousness. I think it would be a drastic change.
I think you're right.
But, anyway, I think about goofy things like that. It's just the way my mind works, I guess.
I don't think it's goofy. I think you have some great points you're making. I was thinking of V for Vendetta when you were talking about him intercepting the transmission on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So watch about 2 months from now, we're going to see somebody do that.
That would be so great. It would be so awesome.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, it would definitely be a fly in the ointment, as they say.
Right. Well, I think, like I said, you can only have bad karma for so long. I think eventually it self-implodes, and these people have created an awful lot of bad karma, if you ask me.
Oh my gosh! When you think about, it's the metaphor of the pendulum, sweeping back the other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have taken it so far in the wrong direction for us that, I think this backlash is going to be severe in some way or another. I don't know when it's coming or how it's coming, but I think it's going to be pretty massive because of what they've done. And of course, from their point of view, it's like, well, we told you what we were going to do. We wrote it in the lockstep document of the Rockefeller Foundation in 2010. We wrote it over 100 years ago in the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. We put it in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document that people became aware of in the 70s and going forward. We put it in our movies. We put it in our TV shows. We've been telling you all along, in the Illuminati game with the cards and all that. We've told you everything that we're going to do. So we don't have any karma. Well, I got news for them. That ain't going to work.
No, they do, because they've entangled everybody else on the timeline, on an alternate timeline, a false matrix timeline. Yeah, they did. And this is the thing, when I mentioned that because we're star beings, because we're descendants of the star people and the visitors, that we have, if they start doing that, where they're doing, whether it's experimentation, whatever they're trying to do, war crimes on a universal scale, or an agenda such as what they've been doing here, that's creating an entanglement in a different space-time. And that is a war. That is a problem. So they do have accountability, and whether they want to acknowledge it or not, that's their trip. It's just kind of like saying, well, I don't believe in God or devils, so I don't have to, I'm not going to have any problems or repercussions. Well, universal law says differently. It doesn't matter if it's a deity or not. And I think that that's going to happen. I really do. So I'm looking at that on the bigger scale of things, in a sense. Yeah. I mean, that as well as I do, as an ascended master consciousness, which we all have at a higher self level, we don't think about doing stuff like us to even think of an agenda like this. I don't know about you, but I can tell I would never even think of something like this.
Of course not. We our minds don't work in that way.
No.
Just good-hearted people have no desire to manipulate and control others. It just doesn't occur to even people who don't have the connection that we do. Just if they're just good people, they would never dream of trying to control or manipulate others. So it's that's a common, very human trait. But these people have that big time, and they either don't have souls, and that's something I always wonder about. They either don't have it, or their connection is so far gone that they can't connect with anything that we would consider, in our spirit, the love and the compassion that we have for other people and other beings and other life forms. It just doesn't exist with them. So are they, people talk about the reptilians and all, the hybrid reptilians, which a lot of people say that many of our politicians and so-called world leaders are actually hybrids like that. And they very well could be. what is your take on them? I mean, do you think they are soulless beings, or what makes them the way they are?
I think they're entity controlled. I've mentioned this before, but to me, it seems like a synthetic entity in the sense that it even could go back to social engineering once again, where you have an entity like a synthetic brainwave template that's been interfaced into and onto them through maybe an MK Ultra program or something they've been subjected to over the years,
Mm-hmm.
even in
Mm-hmm.
childhood. But that's probably where the entity control pattern came from. So I'm not looking at it as an extraterrestrial. I'm looking at more like a synthetic program and an entity control where, yeah, it's vacant. The spirit, the soul has no place to dwell. If they even had one, it might have evacuated, and there's just that. And that would explain their behavior. It would explain everything that they're doing here on this timeline. And the only way they can even have gratification is by making those of us who are enlightened and do have soul, spirit, consciousness to suffer or to be below them, beneath them. So I see
Right.
that, that's what I see. But I think that there's been a lot of reverse engineered technology to such a degree, especially when it comes to aliens and extraterrestrials, that they've tried to create their version of an ET and then utilize it and integrate it onto people. And I think that's been done over the years and decades, and even with these particular groups. And I think that's where you're probably seeing some of that quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote synthetic hybrid.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we know that ritual abuse has been a part of a lot of these families, these so-called, you can use a zillion different labels, Illuminati or whatever, to describe a lot of these families that have been, at the top of the control mechanism for a long time. We know that ritual abuse will create personalities, the psychopathic personality and the loss of compassion and things like that through that abuse. And we see that, that's one of the main tenets of MK Ultra, right?
Oh, absolutely. And they can do it now with an interface. They're talking about the neural interface and synthetic
Right.
telepathy as a way to do that. It's only by sheer protection alone that I was able to navigate out of that, because it destroys. It tries to destroy you from the inside out. It's a
Well,
direct
yeah,
energy
and
weapon.
most people are not able to navigate out of it, and you
No.
were, because of who you are
I think
at
so too.
the
And
spirit
with no
level.
arrogance, I say that, but it's true. I mean, I've obviously
Oh, it
sustained
absolutely.
damage, but I have maintained my spirit, my soul consciousness, which is a big deal.
Yeah, and that is why you were able to get out of it, because most people don't, and most people that are under that system are, in my understanding, in my studies with Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips back in the 90s, we talked about this quite a bit. A lot of them are just programmed to self-destruct. They will commit suicide or walk in front of a bus or whatever they, different things, or different people are programmed in different ways. But the outcome is, once they've outlived their usefulness, they would just self-destruct. And a lot of people have actually done that.
Yeah, they call it forced suicides. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So it takes a powerful being to overcome that, a really powerful being to overcome that. And, hats off to you for doing that and showing the way, because it is possible, for others to do it. They but have to know it's possible.
Right.
And, I know there are some others that have done it as well. And you probably know more than I do, but that part of our world, like I said earlier, is largely been hidden. But now it's coming out more and more. And there's a movie that I was able to sort of watch at a showing back in, I think it was late January. It's called Out of Shadows. Or I'm sorry, that's not right. Sound of Freedom is what it's called. And it was all about child trafficking. And it's a tremendously powerful film. They've been trying to release it, but they can't release it in the normal channels because it's been blocked. They've been trying. They completed it, I think, in 2019, and they've been trying to release it, and they're getting backing now, from what I understand, to be able to release it in the next few months. But the movie is so powerful. I mean, it just blew everybody away that watched it. And it's the guy that plays the lead, Jim Caviezel, who was in The Passion of Christ and Count of Monte Cristo. A tremendous actor, played the lead guy. And it's based on a true story of a guy named Tim Ballard, who's in Utah, who was at one point, he worked for Homeland Security. He also worked for the CIA. But during his work, he ended up leaving those institutions because he saw what was going on, particularly in Central America and South America. But now he's got an organization of a lot of ex-military and ex-intel guys and all that are working worldwide, and they've had quite a few successes of breaking up a lot of these child trafficking rings.
Wow.
And
Excellent.
this guy is an American hero, and more people need to know about him. Look up Tim Ballard. I think his organization is called Underground Railroad or something close to that. But this movie is based on his life story up to a certain point. And this guy is a tremendous hero, and he was depicted brilliantly in this movie. And it will be a game changer if this movie is able to get out into mainstream.
Gosh, it should be. I can't believe they're even trying to censor it,
Well, Hollywood is so engrossed in that very thing. We've seen that, with the Epstein stuff and with Harvey Weinstein and all that, we know that Hollywood is loaded with these pedophiles and these, sick people. And they don't want that to go away. A lot of these powerful producers and, I won't name any more names than that, but a lot of them have already been called out. And Isaac Cappy, I'm sure you've heard of him and the information that he came out with. And then, of course, they took him out. But this is a huge thing. And it's become one of the largest revenue generators. It's either number 2 or number 3 behind drugs and weapons sales around the world.
That's terrible.
And that's how bad it is now and the level that it's on. So it's something that needs to be addressed. And I'm hoping this movie, Sound of Freedom, you can see the trailer if you do a search for it, Sound of Freedom, and watch the trailers is quite good too. But I'm hoping that they can come out with that because it definitely will have a large impact on society once it does. It's just massive. So I wanted to throw that out there for your listeners if they want to look into that and check that out, and if they have the wherewithal to help them in some way, work with the producers or whatever, that would be wonderful too. Because the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned, that those kinds of things get out there and
I agree.
The more that we can put overturn the rocks and expose these people, the better.
I agree. What's interesting too is that they always try to project their psychosis onto everybody else, like everybody else is the criminal when they're the criminals. I could never understand that, and I see that more and more through like even the idiots, in DC. They're projecting their criminal activity on everybody, like they're treating everyone like they're criminals. And I find that just most offensive on so many different levels. Most people have really good lives. They're decent for the most part. I would say most people really do have good intentions. And the idea behind these people doing these insidious things from A to Z and then getting away with it, then projecting what they are on everybody else, like everybody else is the problem. It's just unbelievable.
It is. And if you look at the tenets of Marxism and how Marxism takes over a country or a society, that is one of their tenets, is you always accuse the opposition of whatever it is you're doing. So if you're an extremist liar, then you accuse your opposition of being an extremist liar. And we're seeing it exactly like you said, whatever they're doing to us, they're accusing us of doing. So that's how the game is played with them, and it's quite good. They're rather successful at it.
Yeah, reverse psychology.
It's really human psychology, and but if you do research on Marxism and what Karl Marx wrote and how he wrote methods on how this was done, and they did it in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution. They used a lot of the same exact. You could call it a technology or a system. They used it in Nazi Germany as well. And another part of that is to drive division into social culture and structures, just like you see now, with this whole BS critical race theory where, all white people are inherently racist and, we have to constantly guard that, that their white people are going to do horrible things to, all other people. And I mean, this is absurd. That's not to say there aren't racist people in the world. Of course there are, but they are a tiny, tiny minority in society. The vast majority of people, it would never occur to them to even think like that.
Exactly.
But the mainstream makes it sound like it's the worst thing ever. It is first and foremost that, two things: critical race theory. White people are all white supremacist racists. And also now, with this whole transhumanist agenda, we've got to elevate all transgender people and other people who are not normal in our culture to an elevated status where they are treated better than anybody, and of course this is absurd too. But this is the kind of programming that's going on right now that, they're not talking about the important things, obviously, because they're manipulating us, and they're not going to blow the whistle on themselves and talk about how many businesses they've destroyed, how many lives they've destroyed financially and otherwise, with this whole lockdown thing, But they're going to constantly say, oh, you're all a bunch of racists, and it's terrible, and we just got to get rid of you people, and we got to put all non-white people in every office and every place that we possibly can, so we can get rid of this whole systemic racism. This is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And
I agree.
But it drives a wedge, and these are one of the techniques that are used when you can divide a society and get it fighting amongst itself. Based on that or any other issue that you want to throw out there, whether it's conservative, liberal, I mean, all the dichotomies, all the opposites, supposed opposites, you're going to take advantage of that. You're going to throw it out there, try and divide people, get them arguing amongst themselves about gender, about race, about political affiliation, about education, you name it. It just goes on and on and on. People will never come together under those kinds of programming situations. So, again, as consciousness makes you aware of these things, once you become a conscious human being, and you can look at these things instantly and see this is just manipulation, plain and simple.
Yep. Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing else to it. And see it for what it is, and don't take it to heart and go, yeah, everybody's a racist. If you're white, you're a racist, and you deserve to pay out, all your life salary and everything else to other people that you've been a racist to. And it's so absurd. It's absolutely insane.
It is totally executed as a psychological operation.
Yeah. Just like wearing a mask and just like all these other things. And thank God there are just incredibly intelligent people out there, like Larry Elder and Candace Owens, and people that are just calling nonsense on a lot of this stuff that are just wonderful, and it's so great to hear them. And
I agree. Yeah, people have to stand up as beacons. Just be out there and communicate the truth, and don't worry about their the blowback, because they're predictable. We can pretty much predict their behavior. They're going to attack. The one thing they love to do is arrest everybody. Incarceration is their big game to play. They love that. If you say anything, they want to put you in jail, arrest you, blacklist you, that sort of thing.
Oh, sure. And then the gun issue thing. Okay. So why in the world would they care, about guns? Well, look at every country in the world that has disarmed its population in the last 100 years. What has happened? Exactly. If you just look at that, it becomes blatantly obvious. That would be the last straw for this country if they're able to completely disarm Americans, which I'm telling you right now, that is not ever going to happen.
I don't think so.
There's just
not on
too
right
many
or left.
people are adamant about at least that, right?
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen. But every country, I mean, you think about Russia, it doesn't matter exactly how many people were killed, but it's somewhere in the ballpark, 20, 30 million people were killed in Russia after they were disarmed after the Bolshevik Revolution. Nazi Germany, millions and millions, killed there, and actually quite a bit more killed at the end of the war, when ordinary Germans that were left were put in concentration camps. A lot of people don't understand that that's what happened. And a lot of these piles of dead, emaciated bodies were actually regular Germans at the end of the war that were starved to death. Well, that's a whole nother topic. But anyway,
nobody even knows about that.
No.
Yeah.
And then in communist China, at least 60 million people were absolutely shot and killed because they disagreed with Mao's, new communist takeover. So it's vastly important, and people need to understand history, and that kind of history that is close enough to us to where we can recognize that it did in fact happen, that we can't let that happen here. And exactly. It's so silly, there's a meme that just cracked me up. There's a going around on Facebook. It's the little boy, his picture. And at the top, it says something about, a teacher told me that guns kill people. And at the bottom, the little boy is saying, my pencil flunked my tests. So, I mean, just good. It's perfect. They say, oh, we got to get rid of the guns because the guns are no, the guns are not killing people. Your Manchurian candidates are killing people.
Exactly. And, how many are hearing voices there too?
Yeah. Well, and how many of them have been proven to be on those psychotropic drugs, which is like a gateway into the subconscious of these people, right?
Yep. Orchestrated events. No doubt about that.
So we know that stuff is all false flag events. Trying to dissuade people. And if you look at the actual numbers, if you want to get real about it, look at, 200,000 or 300,000 people killed every year by medical malpractice. Let's talk about hundreds of thousands killed in automobile accidents. Well, nobody's talking about doing away with automobiles. Nobody's talking about doing away with doctors and nurses. But yet, it's easy to sensationalize, these gun events because, oh my gosh, we don't want any of this to ever happen. And I'm not trying to downplay it. So people don't get the wrong idea about this, but it's way out of perspective. And it's a matter of them using these events that I feel like a lot of them are in fact manufactured to sensationalize for their agenda of, disarming the people.
Yep. Spot on.
We need to understand that that's what's going on with this. And, they never talk about when somebody, when some criminal tries to do something and somebody with that's a good person has a weapon and they stop them in their tracks. Right. They don't talk about that. But that happens too, quite a bit, and quite a bit more actually than the events that they do promote and
I agree.
Put out there. So, it's about perspective and understanding here. We've got to understand what's being done to us, how we're being psychologically manipulated on many different levels. And when you realize that and you begin to see it, it becomes a lot clearer. And so the more the merrier, everybody.
I agree.
More that we can share information. I always say, don't try to convince anybody of anything once you have an understanding of these things. But if people ask you questions, absolutely, have a conversation with them. But if you ever go around and say, hey, this is the way it is and that's the way it is, it's not to people who already have a set belief system. You're not going to get anywhere.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, what that reminds me of too is the spell that people are being put under just by words and propaganda. And, spellcraft, we all know that. But it reminds me of Lord of the Rings. Remember when King Theoden was under a spell and Grandma Wormtongue was always manipulating him and Gandalf broke the spell. I mean, that was a really powerful scene. I'm sure y'all remember that. But the idea behind that is really what's going on because they're just taking the life force right out of people. They're under a spell. They're being programmed. They don't even see it.
Oh, that is exactly spot on. It is a spell. It's the COVID spell, right? And that whole narrative of fear, and it's really intimidation, against all of us to say, you're super spreader, you're either going to give it to somebody else or you're going to catch it. It's in the air, it's everywhere. Oh, be afraid.
I call it the Psy War of the worlds because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
It is exactly like that. You hit it right on the head. That's spellcraft, stagecraft. I mean, all those crafts,
Mm-hmm.
witchcraft, but
Definitely weaponized.
not
Yeah.
the positive kind.
Oh no, these are the dark. I wouldn't call them dark magicians, whatever, because there's no dark or light really. It's just a use of energy. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, yeah, there's definitely that going on. We can break those spells. We do it every day.
Yeah. And again, it always boils down to your consciousness because
Mm-hmm.
consciousness equates with awareness and intelligence. And, um, there's ways to bring about that consciousness, but you have to be willing to go there, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Good advice. And you know what I like about this? I don't know if you want to dive into it or not because we have 20 minutes plus or minus. But the your background is obviously star being. You have that energetic, the Pleiadian influence. You want to discuss that a little bit or no?
Well, I discovered probably about 20 years ago that I could channel, and channeling is a slippery slope as far as I'm concerned because um, you can't always discern perfectly who and what you're speaking to or with. So I kind of gave that up after a while, but uh, there are certain intuitive things that seep through in our knowing. I guess that's the only way I can put it. It's
Mhm.
sort of knowingness, and I've always felt a strong connection with the Palladians, and of course when I read the book by Barbara Marciniak that she came out with, Bringers of the Dawn. I
Mhm.
mean, I just went, yep, I totally resonated with that. And, from what I understand, there's always good and bad in every race of beings or every group. But I definitely resonate with the positive aspects of that group.
Mhm.
Always have. And I must say, I resonate with other groups as well that I've read about. So it's not necessarily an identification with a specific group only, but with an intention, I would say.
Mhm.
It's an intention towards goodness or godness,
Right.
that's
That
where
makes
the word
perfect
comes from.
sense. Yeah, I think
So,
that's yeah, I can see that in you too, the energetic signature and the frequency anyway, plus the creativity, the aspect of your music and what you do. Shining light in one form or another, whether it's truth or music or whatever it is you're doing.
yeah, and it's like you were saying earlier, it's all energy, right? It's so
Mm-hmm.
whether it's musical energy or thought energy, vocal, spoken word energy, it's all energy that we're projecting out there. Um, we are, uh, you know, tremendously powerful beings in what we can do, and people are not aware of what they can do. And of course, we've been so stopped down now, and like we were talking about earlier, with not
Mm-hmm.
being able to express emotion and feeling with other people, just even strangers, just walking somewhere,
Right.
in public. That the 90% of communication is nonverbal. And that takes, it's body language, it's an expression. Of course, that's part of body language. It's music. It's all these different vibrations. It's art. All kinds of art, whether it's performing arts or visual art. That's energy too. It's a
Mm-hmm.
projection out there. If you're a great sculptor, when somebody looks at your art, you're projecting a certain energy into what you've created. And
Right.
so being aware of what we're projecting is super important, and being aware, as we've been talking about for an hour and a half or so, is what's being projected on us,
Right.
right?
Yeah. It's time to bounce that back.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I like
And
spirit to spirit, soul to soul communication, and we that old saying, "The eyes are the windows to the soul," too, which I believe is true in a sense. You can really see a lot through people and energetically through the eyes, but yeah, everything's been shut down, and that's got to go. It's got to go. There's no place for this type of submission.
yeah, and it makes me sad when I see how much fear people have in their eyes.
Hmm.
And because that's all we're seeing now in a lot of cases when we go out in public. But I'm so excited to see some of these governors that are pushing back and saying, no, we're not going to, we're not requiring masks. And it's going to take a good while before all the commercial enterprises get with the program, because they're more concerned about liability. Oh, somebody's going to say they got COVID in my store or my gym or whatever. And so I don't want to be sued. So I'm going to make everybody wear a mask, because it sounds like it's going to do something, right? And protect me.
It's like a Band-Aid.
Me from financial loss, right? And liability. And that's actually what keeps this game going. Isn't that crazy? It's like, all right, well, we've discovered that the whole mask thing isn't really helping anybody anywhere. But, the government said we should do it. And if somebody wants to sue me and I didn't do it, then that gives them really good grounds, because they'll say the government said to do it. And then I stopped doing it. And now somebody sues me and I'm losing my business now because of a financial lawsuit. That's the kind of things that we're going to be up against if we're able to get all the states, which might never happen, but at least the ones that are rejecting this nonsense with the masks. It's going to take a while to, percolate out of all those establishments, because, they are scared to death of lawsuits and personal liability or, corporate liability and all that.
And it's more of a liability to have somebody pass out with hypoxia with a mask on, and you're freaking.
You would think, right? You would think that the damage that's being done by people wearing masks and forcing children to wear, that is so psychologically damaging and physically damaging in other ways
child
as
abuse.
well. But
anyway, look at it, if you ask me.
It absolutely is child abuse, and I'm just mortified when I see these parents, forcing their little kids to wear masks. And what's that kid supposed to think? The message is, okay, you're either going to catch this deadly thing or you're going to give it to somebody else. Why in the world would you want to put that message into your little child's brain? That is just, that is torture. That is psychological torture and manipulation. It's terrible.
Right. And then a lot of them are so little, I don't know if they can even communicate. They're not getting enough oxygen, Yeah. That's the poor little things are probably getting brain damage. So, I don't want to think about it, but my point is that, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But the bottom line is, I don't think they should have ever had masks, obviously, ever. No. That should have never even happened. Of course,
all the studies that prove masks don't work anyway were completely buried. You might find them on page 400 of a Google search, right? And nobody ever goes that far. It's just, there have been many studies done showing that masks are completely ineffective, even if there is, a so-called, pandemic.
Get a hazmat. That's going to happen,
Yeah, the people that are actually dealing with, deadly pathogens, you see what they wear. They got these hazmat things. So, it's ludicrous to say that the flimsy little mask is going to do anything if that was in fact reality, that those pathogens were everywhere in the air and they're just flying everywhere, and unless you sit down in a restaurant.
That's right. As soon as you sit down, you're good.
You're good. The Rona is smart, baby. The Rona knows you sit down, you're off limits, and it just goes somewhere else,
It's terrible. I can't believe it's been going on over a year, though. I'm just so over it. And I'm a trainer, I'm an athlete. I love to train. And of course I refuse to work out gym without, with that enforces masks. I'm not going to do it.
Oh yeah, me too. I canceled my gym membership last year, and I wrote him a note and said, you people, it's sad to me that you have the wherewithal to stand up to this in a court of law and, push back on this, but you're too cowardly to do so. And, they were saying, this one gym that I've been working out with or at for the last 10 years, they have an indoor running track, and I love running. I run all the time. So they said, no, you must wear a mask while you're running. And I said, no, you must, give up my membership.
How can you do it? I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I can.
No, you can't. You can't. It's absurd. And when I see people trying to do that, out trying to jog or run with them, I'm thinking, In what world does that make any sense whatsoever? But
Mm-mm. No, it's beyond rational. Let's put it that way. It can't be good for your lungs. I don't care. Some people say it is. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it.
no. And then, of course when you expel air, you're also expelling other particles,
Hmm.
out of your body, the toxins and other things. And when you expel it into a mask, you're just going to keep rebreathing that stuff. And
Right. So good. I went to the dentist the other day just for a teeth cleaning, and it was really interesting because the gal there who was doing my teeth said they've had more people coming in with broken teeth because of stress from biting and clamping down on their just really
Mhm.
hard, literally breaking their teeth out of stress. And it,
Not
like
surprising.
just off the charts insofar as people having issues like that. And yeah, it just shows you what's going on now. And then I
I
wonder if part of it's
remember
the mask. Go ahead.
early on when they did the lockdown, I was going to a Trader Joe's and I was just walking up from the parking lot and there was like 10 people in line and they were, 6 feet apart and there was two employees out there, with their masks on saying, no, you must stand in that circle. You're too close to get back in the circle, and there, all these people are, it was just insane, the whole setup they were doing there. And this one guy, he walked past all the people that were in line. He just walked right next to him and just kept walking up. And when he walked by this one guy, the guy freaked out and started screaming at him and saying,
Mm.
you walked right by me, it's as if he just gave him a deadly dose of something, it just, and the guy was literally wanting to, just punch him out for daring to walk within 2 feet of him. It was just mind-boggling. And you see, this is mind control in manifestation.
Oh yeah.
And
No kidding.
it's just sad to see that. It really is, to see the level of fear.
Hmm. They
It
get
seems
triggered
like
big
some
time.
people are kind of, every once in a while I'll talk to somebody and they go, "Oh, I'm just so tired of all this, mask stuff, and
Hmm.
but they're still going to do it because they're scared, but they're really over it." So I'm hoping that that sense of, we've had enough of this will just keep going and we'll just stop it at
Well,
some
think
point.
about it. I mean, after all this time, it's been over a year.
Yeah.
I don't think this should have gone on over a month, but that's just me. Yeah, it needs to end yesterday. It really does. I don't have any tolerance. Well, Aries. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. We have that
that's right. Fire.
definitely a short tolerance for that kind of ignorance, right?
Oh, I think so. I think we get better in our years, though. I think we get more mellow as
Yeah,
we get older.
I must say I've become, I don't know if I'm less blunt than I used to be, and
You're pretty chill,
I'm
but you are
I'm better
fiery. I know
than
that too.
I'm
Yeah.
better than I used to be.
Hmm.
I'll say that, and you have to temper what you know with compassion. I guess that's one of the main things I've learned over the years, to try and do that more. Although I don't always succeed, but
Well, you have to be a saint to put up with the crap on this timeline. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, seriously. I mean, I am a pretty zen at times, but man, this is like, oh, this is insane. That's what they're trying to do. It's passive harassment anyway. Look at it. They're provoking anyway.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and they want people to become unhinged because then they can blame it on whatever narrative they're pushing at the time. They'll white supremacists, or they call them whatever kind of phobia person they want to, push this week.
Hmm.
They'll use that if somebody becomes, unhinged and starts acting crazy. They're just going to use it to their advantage, of course. And they're pushing everybody's buttons with this.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
We
Well,
want to see that big rebound, right?
that's right. Yeah, kind of like the mirror effect where it goes right back on them.
Yeah, let's see that pendulum swing back the other way
I
with,
think it's
with
I think it's going
double
to
the
happen.
force.
Hmm. What's been on my mind a lot, and I know we have a few minutes here, but I wanted to mention I've been watching Yellowstone a lot, and I don't know, not the movie or anything. I'm talking about just the idea
The
behind.
park.
We've had a lot of volcanic activity,
Hmm.
so I'm looking at Yellowstone as a possible issue at some point.
Yeah, and I think that aren't there other volcanoes as well that have been becoming active besides Yellowstone? I seem to remember hearing
Well,
some of that.
yeah, they've been having all kinds of things going off recently with Iceland and everything else. There's another one over
Right.
there. Yeah. So I was just thinking, though, it's kind of like a chain reaction when you see that kind of event going on across the globe. And it seems to me like I think it's overdue, my point. And not that I'm putting it out to the universe. I'm just saying I think that I'm keeping an eye on it intuitively.
Yeah, and I think the energetic manipulation that we're experiencing and all this pent-up frustration definitely is going to contribute to that kind of an imbalance, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I totally agree that the planet takes the hit, no doubt. Yeah.
So that's, as the collective consciousness goes, the world goes.
That's right.
And, we are the creator beings, whether we know it or not. Some of us know it, some don't. But collectively, as we put our thoughts out there into the world, that's the way it's going. That's why the dark side, of course, takes so much effort in trying to control the way we think, because they want us to create the world that they want. And they've done a pretty good job of it. We have created a lot of what they want. But it's time for us to take our power back and create what we want.
I agree. I like bliss. I like peace. I like freedom.
Yeah.
I don't like drama. I hate drama.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody does with, if they really sit and meditate on it, everybody wants that. Everybody wants peace. Everybody wants that, that connectedness and that feeling of camaraderie and, just all the positive emotions that we as human beings have. We all want that.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, if what your religion is. I think it just goes beyond all of that stuff. That's a core value that most humans have. If they're willing to actually get down to that level, because a lot of people are really still operating at the ego level and ego gratification and, domination and all those narcissistic, psychopathic tendencies. But if people are able to actually level with themselves, we all have those same core desires of great things, wonderful things.
I agree. Well said. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Jimi, you'll have to come back because it's an honor. I would love talking to you. It's been a great interview.
A pleasure to have a conversation like this.
It's like Edward Scissorhands gets to get out of the house.
Yeah, I think I've become more monk-like this year than ever. It's just because, going out in public is so depressing to me to see what goes on.
I know.
I think I've stayed in the house more than I ever have and been able to actually, most of this year I've been working from home as well. So it's really nice, Solaris, to be able to talk with you and have a kindred soul who understands.
Likewise. Yeah, it's been wonderful. And anytime you want back, just let us know. Love to have you over at the station. I know you're not doing any shows right now, but if you decide to be a host or anything again, geez, I'm sure we can get you over here. So just a heads up. Yeah,
that may be in the future. Right now, I'm going to do a few, video type interviews. I've got a couple things coming up, but nothing, on a regular schedule. It's just going to be kind of here and there.
Awesome. Well, you're top of the line, so I certainly appreciate it. So I want to thank you. And once again, they can contact you on your website or YouTube channel or email or whatever's best.
Yeah, and I'll throw my email address out there. If somebody, if you want to troll me, please don't use it. But if you want to send me a message,
don't do it.
They can send it to jimibrent@gmail.com.
Perfect. I'm sure you'll get excellent emails back. That's wonderful.
I hope so.
I know so. And I do want to thank you. We're almost out of time here. I do want to thank all the listeners tonight. And stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky coming up next to sell you on tonight from Down Under with their fantastic show. They're going to be discussing biological weapons, part 3. Well, that dovetails into what we've been talking about tonight, Jimi. Yeah, definitely. Hey, are you playing any gigs then live or no?
No, they've completely shut us down.
Wow.
I've had, like 3 restaurant duo gigs in the last year. That's it. That's
too bad. Well, you have some great talent too. As a musician.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping that will open up again soon. We'll see.
Yeah, because Vegas has been pretty quiet, huh?
Oh, it's ridiculous. It just really is. But they've thrown enough money out there to the casinos to placate them through this. But in the meantime, they've destroyed the entertainment community and a lot of the small businesses, like they have everywhere.
Right. Yeah, same thing over here too. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens down the timeline, but we keep our happy thoughts, Peter Pan, right?
Yes, we project out into the universes, our good intentions and our happy thoughts. Hopefully,
Right.
we'll get there.
We will. And just remember, this is just one timeline, just one terraform rock called Earth. That's what I always tell everybody. There's a big multiverse out there, and we're part of it.
For sure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm going to let you go and drop the server here, but just thank you so much. It's been a great show, Jimmy, and you take care, and I'll be in touch with you.
You too.
All right. Good night. Night, everybody.